This man served 17 years in prison after being mistaken for someone that looked just like him. In 1999, Richard Jones was falsely accused and imprisoned for a robbery that happened at a Walmart in Kansas. A robber tried to snatch a purse from a woman in a parking lot, but this man was not Richard. It was a man who looked just like him and had a similar name as Richard. The person that they should have been looking for was this man named Ricky Amos. But unfortunately, an eyewitness at the Walmart identified Richard as a culprit and testified against him in court. Even though Richard had an alibi at the time of the crime, it wasn't enough evidence and he was put behind bars for a 19-year sentence. Richard tried to appeal, but nothing ever came out of it. Now, 16 years later, in 2015, other inmates began telling Richard that there was another inmate who looked just like him. Richard had a gut feeling, so he contacted his attorney, and when they put Richard and Ricky side by side, it was clear that they were identical and they might have made a mistake. 17 years later, Richard was finally released from prison when the witnesses said that they can barely tell the difference between the two men. After his release, Richard received a $1 million settlement by the state.
This teenager killed his sister over the Wi-Fi password. Kevon Watkins from Georgia was just 16 years old when he turned his family's lives upside down forever. On February the 2nd, 2018, an argument broke out in his home. There had been an issue with the Wi-Fi connection and Kevon was not happy. He wanted to play video games but was unable to because the connection kept dropping. In a bid to attempt to stop the other members of his family also using the internet, he decided to change the Wi-Fi password. He felt that this would be a good way to resolve the issues he was having. However, him and his mum got into a heated debate over the issue, which could have been easily resolved. Tragically, the argument would end in death. Kevon had an older sister, Alexis, and she decided to step in between the pair. However, this decision would prove fatal. Kevon and Alexis ended up in a physical fight and police were called. Kevon got his sister in a chokehold where he incapacitated her for 15 minutes until police arrived. Kevon only released the grip that he had over Alexis when a police officer commanded that he do so. She was tragically pronounced dead from asphyxiation. When she was killed, she actually had a young son and a fiancé. Kevon was sentenced to life in prison.
This is the story of Boris Weisfeiler, an American professor who was potentially abducted by a murderous cult. In 1984, Boris Weisfeiler went into the Chilean wilderness on a solo backpacking trip. He tells his sister Olga that he'll give her a call on the day he's supposed to be back, but when that day comes, he never calls. Boris never made it back from Chile, but the American police were hesitant to go look for him, because it was rumored that deep in the Chilean wilderness there was a cult being run by disgraced World War II German soldiers. So weeks pass and nothing is being done, but then Olga gets a message that they found Boris's backpack. It was found by a river, and the Chilean government basically uses that to say that Boris drowned, case closed. But it turns out that missing from his backpack was his passport, some cash, and his ticket home. And Olga's like, if he accidentally drowned, why did he take all that stuff with him? So years go by and the investigation's just closed, there's no new information. But one day, Olga gets a letter. And this is a declassified document from the US government saying that Boris was on the property of the Colonia Dignidad when he disappeared. So what the heck does that mean? Well, the Colonia was the Aryan cult that was hiding out in the Chilean wilderness. It was founded by Paul Schaefer, who had to flee Germany after World War II. Though his involvement in the war was bad, he was kicked out of Germany after it came out that he was abusing young boys in his care. So he fled with other Germans to Chile and opened his own prison camp in the wilderness. And when Boris went missing in 1985, the last place he was seen was on the property of the cult. Boris's body was never found, but there is so much more to his story, and you can check it out tonight on the podcast.
That was my bad. I was playing the game, and I butt dialed the phone. Okay. That was my bad. What? No. It's only me home.
Okay, so this was just an accident. You call 911. Did you say you killed 2 people or something like that?
Rainbow 16. I had my headset on.
Okay, how old are you?
17.
You're 17. Do you have a driver's license or no?
No.
Okay.
I don't have a driver's license.
Are you, where's your parents at?
Work.
Okay.
No.
Do you want me to talk to your mom?
Yeah, you can.
You're not in any trouble, man. If it's an accident.
Hey, is this Elijah's mom?
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, so what happened is, I guess he's saying that he was playing a video game, and in the process of accidentally calling 911, he said that he killed 2 people, but he was talking about on the game. So we thought that there was a double murder, so we showed up to your house with a bunch of us. That's why we're here talking to your son, okay? So there's nothing to be worried about, okay?
Yeah, I got a call.
Yeah, we're just trying to, we're just doing our due diligence here, trying to figure everything out and make sure that everybody's okay, because we have to do that when we get a 911 call.
This woman faked a pregnancy to get paid time off work, and it backfired in the worst way.
Shockingly, Robin Folsom faked her pregnancy. She didn't do it once, she did it several times. And each time at work, she would get paid maternity leave. Now, Robin really committed to this whole charade. She wore a fake belly and would give her colleagues updates on her pregnancy. When the baby was born, she would then show them photos. Now, some of her colleagues were getting skeptical, mainly because the baby photos she showed them seemed to be of a different baby each time. Now, everything sort of backfired one day. Whilst Robin was pretending to be pregnant, her fake belly seemed to fall off her. A colleague saw it and reported her. An investigation was launched, and that's when it was discovered that Robin actually had no kids. She just wanted paid leave off work. Now, Robin was forced to resign her job, and she's since been charged for what she did. If she's found guilty, she could serve up to 25 years in prison and pay up to $100,000 in fines. For more 7 Sin crime stories, remember to follow.
This nurse had a baby with his patient who was in a vegetative state. In 2018, a patient that was in a vegetative state at this long-term care facility in Phoenix gave birth to a baby boy. Hacienda Healthcare is a nursing home for patients with disabilities, and in this case, this woman was not able to speak or move. And this woman, who has not been identified, has been in this facility for over 14 years. Just like any other day, a nurse was assigned to this patient, and when she walked into her room to change her clothes, she noticed that the woman was moaning in pain, and then she didn't know she was pregnant until she suddenly gave birth. Obviously, all the nurses were extremely shocked and wondered who would do this to someone who's so vulnerable. Police then ordered all male workers to provide a DNA sample, and that's when 36-year-old Nathan Sutherland was a match with the baby's DNA. Police later found out that Nathan was responsible for taking care of this woman at the time that she was assaulted, and he was arrested and sentenced to 10 years in prison.
Emergency, what's your location?
Hi, I'm free.
Reading you the confession of Jeffrey Epstein's former security guard. Mr. Epstein had a portable stage he would get set up. He would wear the bullhead, and I saw Stone wearing and give a speech about what he called freedom. He would say this island is the only free place in the world. One time I was helping in the kitchen. I don't know if the chef was effing with me, but I hope so. But he was separating what looked to me like the torso of a very young skinned pig. It had been roasted and he was chopping it into quarters, the ribs to be served that evening and the rest to be broken down for soups and casseroles. I said jokingly that it looked like a little kid. He just gave me an awful, dead-eyed look for a second and said, watch it. We had to put his body up in an outbuilding because the ground was frozen. We put him through a wood chipper and then burned everything to ash. There were bits of charred bone left over when I swept it all into a trash bag and threw it out with the regular trash. This, above anything else, I feel the most guilty for. After that, if I wasn't in before, I was definitely in now.
Nothing, and I genuinely mean nothing could give me chills like this photo. So this picture that I sourced, it came from the Elderwood Bed and Breakfast that's located in Louisiana, and it was taken by this woman right here, Meredith Den, and sent to her husband. It's the middle of the night and she's hearing things down the hallway, so she took this picture and sent it to her husband, not even realizing what she caught in the frame. But before we get into it, if you're not already, please make sure to go check out my podcast, the creepiest one you know, Creep Time the Podcast. I've got the link in the bio and it's available on Spotify and Apple. Now, in the background of this photo, she had captured something that most people find very difficult to explain. If you look to the top left of the photo, there is a figure that is watching her from the stairs. And it's not even clear from this photo if what she captured was an actual person who was watching her, because I feel like she would have seen them. But I don't know, the closer you get to this photo, the more unnerving it becomes, because it almost looks like somebody with their full jaw unhinged.
This is the story of Boris Weisfeiler, an American professor who was potentially abducted by a murderous cult. In 1984, Boris Weisfeiler went into the Chilean wilderness on a solo backpacking trip. He tells his sister Olga that he'll give her a call on the day he's supposed to be back, but when that day comes, he never calls. Boris never made it back from Chile, but the American police were hesitant to go look for him, because it was rumored that deep in the Chilean wilderness there was a cult being run by disgraced World War II German soldiers. So weeks pass and nothing is being done, but then Olga gets a message that they found Boris's backpack. It was found by a river, and the Chilean government basically uses that to say that Boris drowned, case closed. But it turns out that missing from his backpack was his passport, some cash, and his ticket home. And Olga's like, if he accidentally drowned, why did he take all that stuff with him? So years go by and the investigation's just closed, there's no new information. But one day, Olga gets a letter. And this is a declassified document from the US government saying that Boris was on the property of the Colonia Dignidad when he disappeared. So what the heck does that mean? Well, the Colonia was the Aryan cult that was hiding out in the Chilean wilderness. It was founded by Paul Schaefer, who had to flee Germany after World War II. Though his involvement in the war was bad, he was kicked out of Germany after it came out that he was abusing young boys in his care. So he fled with other Germans to Chile and opened his own prison camp in the wilderness. And when Boris went missing in 1985, the last place he was seen was on the property of the cult. Boris's body was never found, but there is so much more to his story, and you can check it out tonight on the podcast.
The Teletubbies might have been inspired by a Bulgarian children's asylum called La La Land. The children in the asylum were treated terribly, locked in cold, dark rooms, abused, and starved. All of the children had facial deformities from being starved and beaten, causing them to smile constantly. The isolation led them to sing and dance by themselves, even without music. They would only speak gibberish when spoken to because they didn't understand Bulgarian or how to communicate in general. The 4 children met a horrific demise on the same day, and it's said that they are the 4 characters in the Teletubbies show. A 7-year-old with a facial deformity and deafness was a troublesome child who often was locked outside. Frostbite turned his limbs permanently blue, likely inspiring Tinky Winky's purple color. Another child had a facial deformity that stretched her face into a permanent smile. Locked in a cold, dark room for 5 years, she danced around without music. Lala's character and the yellow color were inspired by her. A 6-year-old mute boy was often sick and starved. He frequently vomited and was left face down in it by his caretakers. His character Dipsy and the color green likely came from his sickly appearance. The youngest child was abandoned at birth with a deformed face, causing a creepy smile. She suffered a terrible incident when caretakers threw her into a fire, inspiring Poe's character and the color. The reason behind the Teletubbies' television stomachs was linked to the children's only source of comfort in the asylum, which was television, and it played constantly. When they overheard the director planning to remove their TVs, they panicked. In desperation, they hid 4 televisions in their stomachs, following the practice of swallowing toys. The next day, they were found in agony, having clawed their stomachs open to reveal the televisions. This disturbing image became the basis for the Teletubbies' design, with TVs inserted in their stomachs where they watch videos sent by kids.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Oh. I just finished.
real quick, okay? Okay, all right, okay. Are you good? Okay, I'm so sorry. I just, there's no way you would have let your kid walk by.
If you need to step aside, please do.
So, okay. He's okay. He's good. You good? Okay. He's good. But yeah, he was the one.
What the fuck? Is this thing on?
This is why you have to be careful who you let into your Halloween parties. So this is a photo of who police believed was a guest at a Halloween party in Rochester, New York in the 1940s. The party was being thrown by Jack and Amelia Layton, and they actually noticed that this guest was outside of the party watching the guests through a window. The report claims that Amelia believed the guest was her friend Jan, who tended to go above and beyond for Halloween, creating very scary costumes. So she let this person in believing it was her friend Jan. But then 20 minutes later, Jan shows up, and that guest could not be found anywhere. So Amelia starts running around the party asking everyone if they knew who that guest was, and no one had recognized that person. So she goes into her daughter's room, who was playing while the party was happening. And the police report states that the only thing there left of Amelia's daughter was a bloody shoe. 4 other reports of this guest being at parties that night were called into police, and all of them resulted in missing children's cases. The identity of this person has never been found, and none of the kids have been found either.
What killer kids look like today. Eric Smith was sentenced to life in prison at age 13. This was for murdering 4-year-old Derek Robbie. Eric saw Derek walking alone in the park. He then took Robbie to some nearby woods and dropped a large rock on the 4-year-old's head, ending his life. Over the years, Eric Smith has been interviewed many times, most recently in 2021. When Alyssa Bustamante was only 15, she was sentenced to 30 years in prison. This was for ending the life of her neighbor, 9-year-old Elizabeth Alton. Alyssa used a knife to end Elizabeth's life. Alyssa then wrote in her diary, "I just killed someone." This is what Alyssa looks like today. She'll be eligible for parole in 2024, meaning that she may soon be released.
Sarah, I can't breathe, babe.
That's on you.
Sarah, I can't breathe.
It's on you.
Sarah.
Problem is I fell asleep. I fell asleep.
When did you do CPR?
This morning, when I found it.
Before you called?
Yes!
It's 1 o'clock right now.
I tried. I was awake, but I actually got out of the bed at like 12:30ish, whatever. So I came downstairs, and I was like, oh, he's in the suitcase still. And that's when I found him, and I took him out, and I tried doing CPR, and then I called him, and then I called you guys.
Did he get here before the fire department got here?
Who?
Your husband? Or
Yes.
your ex-husband?
Yes.
Okay. Where does he live at?
Right down the street.
Okay. So you were playing, and who zipped him up?
I did, but then I fell asleep.
Okay. You're okay. I wasn't here. I'm just trying to figure out what happened.
I fell asleep, so I don't know if he suffocated or like had an aneurysm or a heart attack or what.
What kind of medical conditions does he have?
None that I know of.
Nothing that you know of.
None
You
that I
didn't take
know
any
of.
medicine?
No.
No medicine.
All we had was a bottle of wine. Literally, just a bottle of wine.
Okay.
Doing puzzle artwork. Then we decided to play hide and seek. That's all that happened.
Today I want to talk about a case that shocked the entire Texas community. A case that desperately needs answers. This is the unsolved murder of Elizabeth Barraza. At around 7 a.m. on January 25th, 2019, 29-year-old Elizabeth started setting up for a garage sale in front of her home in Tomball, Texas, when an unidentified person approached her. They then shot Elizabeth 4 times at point-blank range, killing her. Elizabeth's Ring doorbell video footage, although placed out of view, was able to capture the audio of the attack as well as what her killer did next. In the audio, you can hear someone approach Elizabeth, which startles her. She says, "Good morning," and then the unidentified person shoots Elizabeth 3 times, at which point she falls to the ground. Her killer then stands over her, shooting her 1 final time in the head. The Ring doorbell video footage then shows her killer speed away in a 4-wheel drive Nissan Frontier with a Pro 4X sticker, which they had parked up the street from Elizabeth's house and had been left running. This is the closest image to the truck Elizabeth's killer was driving. It was quickly determined that Elizabeth's murder was not random, as neighboring home surveillance footage captured the killer's truck casing the neighborhood and Elizabeth's house the night before the murder and the morning of. They were waiting for her husband Sergio to leave. Surveillance footage from the home across the street was able to capture the entire murder as it unfolded.
In the video, you can see Elizabeth's killer, who was wearing a bathrobe with either long hair or wearing a wig and boots, park their truck up the street and then walk to approach Elizabeth. After, they run back to their truck. But sadly, even capturing her murder on video has not been enough to identify Elizabeth's killer. It's now been 2 years and there has yet to be a lead. The police's theory is that the killer was not working alone, as video footage shows the truck coming back by the house minutes after the shooting to make sure Elizabeth was actually dead. Elizabeth was putting together this garage sale in hopes to make some extra money for her and Sergio's upcoming 5-year anniversary trip to Disney. And unlike most garage sales, Elizabeth did not broadcast that she was having one, which confirms the fact that her murder was not random. I'm going to add the video footage of the moments leading up to her murder and the moments right after. I'm skipping over the graphic parts as it's not necessary to see. Viewer discretion is advised.
This is the case of a 6-month-old with such severe rodent bites that bones were exposed and some of his fingers had to get amputated. On September 13th, Evansville police responded to a 911 call from David Schonebaum. Around 7 a.m., he told the operator that his son was covered in blood and it looked like his fingers had been chewed off. Before he called 911, he later told police that after his son went to sleep, he didn't hear any noises from him and that David himself fell asleep on the couch around 3 a.m. He told police that he woke up around 6:30 and went to go check on the baby, and when he went to the bedroom, he saw his son laying on his stomach in his bassinet covered in blood. After seeing his son, he told police that he called his wife's sister, Delana Thurman, who was also living in the house, into the bedroom for help. And they brought the baby into the bathroom to wash him off to see where all of this blood was coming from. When first responders got there, they noticed that the baby was covered in wounds and had been bitten more than 50 times by rats. He had bites on his forehead, right cheek, nose, right leg, foot, and arm, and both hands. From what I read, skin was missing on all of his fingers. In some of them, the fingertip bones were exposed, and in 2 of his fingers, skin was missing going halfway down his fingers. First responders rushed him to the hospital where they found that his temperature was 93.5 degrees Fahrenheit and he lost so much blood that he needed a blood transfusion. After they were able to get the 6-month-old stable, they transferred him to a hospital in Indianapolis, and it was released that several of his fingers had to be amputated. Back at the house, police saw that the house was dirty and cluttered with trash all over the floor, rat feces on the floor, and there was still blood in the baby's bassinet with rodent footprints all in it. David told police that there has been a rat problem for the last 6 months, but said that he had been getting professional help from Terminix and showed investigators 6 different receipts from the last 6 months. However, when police looked into the Terminix records, they realized that the Terminix employee noted that the trash bags stacked in the backyard were what was attracting the rats and that the employee never went into the house on his visit. David told police that he was living in the home with his wife Angel and their 3 kids, as well as his wife's sister Delana and her 2 kids. Angel was not at the house at the time of the incident because she had checked herself into a mental health facility on September 10th, but she was released a day early on September 13th after finding out what happened to her son. Also, from what has been released, the family has had multiple interactions with DCS. The first time was in December of last year when David and Angel's middle child was injured, and it was believed to have been due to a lack of supervision on David's part. Then again in June of this year when there was a claim of child AB to the same 3-year-old again on David's behalf. In April, the family started getting bi-weekly visits from a social worker from Magliner Home-Based Services, which is a mental health facility. In their notes, they said that the house was in the same condition as I mentioned earlier, but they also noted that the house was slowly improving. And their most recent interaction with DCS was just 2 weeks before this incident. On September 1st, David and Angel's oldest and Delana's oldest went to a teacher and told them that their toes had been bitten by mice. It didn't say for sure if the teacher reported it, but I assume they did because DCS did go to the house 4 days later. On that visit, Delana told the DCS worker that it wasn't mice or rat bites and that the marks were scratches from the kids' bed frames. The social worker came back on September 9th and went over a safety plan with the family and planned on coming back on September 14th, which would have been a day after this incident. And because of what happened to the 6-month-old, all of the kids were taken out of David, Angel, and Elena's care. Then finally, on September 21st, all 3 of them were arrested and charged with multiple child neglect charges. In order of their picture, David received 3 counts of neglecting a dependent, Angel received 6 counts of neglecting a dependent, and Elena received 2 counts of the same charge. The bails for David and Angel were originally set for $10,000, but when I looked back at it, Angel's bail was raised to $200,000 and David is now being held without bond. Elena's bond was originally set for $2,500, but it has since been raised to $25,000. Both Angel and Elena have a review hearing on November 3rd, but David requested more time to seek counsel, so the only future dates in his court record is on September 28th for a counsel hearing.